Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 4 o'clock on Tuesday, March 26, 2024. Transportation Ad Hoc Committee meeting would now come to order. Madam Clerk, take the roll, please.
McBride? Livingston? Here. Weaver?
Here.
Walker?
Here.
Mackey?
Here.
Motion approved. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. And also, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who are present this afternoon but are not on the committee. Councilwoman Newton, good afternoon to you. Councilwoman Terratio, our Vice Chair, Councilman Pugh, Councilwoman Barron, Councilman Branham, and Councilwoman English. Glad to have you all with us this afternoon. Next item on the agenda is item 2, approval of the minutes. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second?
It's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston? Here. Weaver?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Mackey?
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, next item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. Any changes, additions, or deletions? Mr. Brown?
No requested changes.
All right, entertain a motion.
Move to approve?
Second, moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Mackey?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 4, election of the chair. I'll entertain a motion.
Chair,
You recognize Ms. Mackey?
I'd like to nominate Overture Walker for chair.
Second.
Properly second. Any discussion? I hope not. There being none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston?
Well, yes.
Weaver?
A wholehearted yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Mackey? Motion approved.
All right. Thank you to my colleagues for your vote of confidence. Next item on the agenda is item 5, items for discussion or action. 5A, Atlas Road rescoping. You are recognized, either Mr. Brown or Director Maloney.
Thank you, Chairman. This is to, you look in your packets and it starts on page 8 of 20. The requested restoring of the scope of Atlas Road from Bluff to Shop Road. Now I had 15 million in here, and down below under this request it says 12 million, and the reason for two minds on that, it's 12 million. The $3 million has already been utilized, and that was on right-of-way for that area. So while this is rescoping it, some activities had occurred on this section of Atlas Road, and the right-of-way acquisition has already occurred. So it would be for a $12 million project budget. There was also a supplement that came in from Clerk of Council. If you have it, it's just a couple pages stapled together. And the first page is a letter to Dr. Thompson from myself from June of 2022, and Council did approve this in a briefing document back in July of 2022. And this was for the use of reserve fund, a plan for inflation coverage, use in the road maintenance system, which Council has approved $5 million be used for that. And then project D-scopes for some later scheduled projects that underwent D-scopes. And the best project that we have that's not already in right-of-way or some other aspect is where Atlas Road was removed, not narrowed, but a section was removed. And so the next page of the handout is a map of that. On the map shows from Bluff Road to Garner's Ferry Road. What we have coming up in the next item is the award, recommendation of award for that section. That's the broader stroked line, because that is a widening from 2 lanes to 5 lanes. But this rescope section is a widening from 2 lanes to 3 lanes with bike lanes on each side that are 4 feet wide, and then 5-foot concrete sidewalk on each side. So essentially, if this is rescoped, then from Bluff Road to Garner's Ferry Road, there'll be a continuation of sidewalk on both sides, bike lanes adjacent to the travel lanes on both sides, and either 3-lane or 5-lane configurations. Of that handout, the final page has kind of a blow-up of what's on the last page, but you'll look at the landscape printed page is a detail of the Transportation Penny Program forecast using the latest March numbers for what's been invested or expended, but using the total fund that came from the referendum of $656,000 for roadway fund, the Greenway Fund at $80 million, and the comment at $300 million. And then there's the program reserve set by council back in 2022, the interest earned minus the finance costs, which we talked about at the State of the Penny, and the general fund payment. So those are the total revenue funds on the penny. In addition to that, the next column is the grants that have come in, and then finally what's been spent or invested. That leaves us with our net remaining accounts. We did a projection, and that's on the last page, and those numbers are transferred in here. The $383,000 for roadways, the $36 million remaining for greenways, and the 80.
Director Maloney, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
But I think my colleagues are just as nonplussed as I am at the moment. We don't have, I guess, whatever it is you're referencing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, continue on.
Yes, sir. So that's the entire supporting information for the rescope, and in the end showing with the rescope and the current projection that there will be a account balance remaining. So the rescope, we do have a table in there that mirrors this, and again, with the map that we're showing the area from rescoping from Bluff Road to Shop Road, that is requested to be reinserted into the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Maloney, I'm a little confused on the language. What is a rescope and a descope? I don't have a clue.
That's a good question, sir. In different times in 2019, 2020, they were looking at the budgets then, and at the time, say the I-20 Broad River Road interchange project wasn't a reserve fund, but it was going to be spent on that, as well as the other fund that's now the program reserve. So they didn't have any reserves. They didn't. So they were looking at the inflation then and saying, we need to kind of reduce the scope on certain projects. And they went through that, and council approved that removal of scope. So that was what descope was.
Rescope is like a realignment or rethinking or
Rescope is restoring the scope to the referendum.
restoring the scope. And what's a descope?
That was prior. That was when they cut some of the scope.
Oh, okay.
Director Maloney, allow me to take a stab at it.
Yes, sir.
Go
Not
real
I,
slow.
not I will, because I was there.
No, so,
You got it.
no, I'm just, so in essence, we're going back to the original plan for the Atlas Road widening.
Okay.
So when you descope, then you narrow or you minimize the original plan. Rescope, meaning that we're going back to what the original plan was. That's the proposal.
Got it.
Would that be correct, Director Maloney?
Yes, sir.
Yes, as a trial lawyer, sometimes I have to translate for experts. Jurors.
I'm a game
Mr.
talk
Chair, may I be
graduate. Give me a break here, okay?
You recognize, Madam Chair.
Take over the floor, please.
Thank you, thank you. Director Maloney, if you could walk me through a little the project reserve versus the program reserve. I remember the program reserve, and you have it in here, we set aside the 31.1 million to be used as approved by county council. And so with what we have before us now of basically restoring the scope for Atlas Road, are we having to pull from the program reserve to do this?
Not at this time, ma'am.
Okay, so we can do this without touching program reserve. We're only touching project reserve. Is that correct?
Looking at the account balance of 29 million, we would be just getting into $1 million of it as we go. But at this point, all these widenings haven't gotten to that. This is looking at the maturity of the whole program with the projections.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Director Maloney, when you say the project reserve, are you referring to those dollars that we saved when the state took over the Broad River interchange?
Yes, sir.
Widening?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because that number 52.5 looked very familiar.
Yes, sir.
So,
That was that.
Mr. Branham, you recognized?
Thank you. I think that might have kind of answered my question as far as where the money was coming from, and was there any concern that we were risking not having appropriate reserves for some of the larger projects that are still to come, like, for example, widening Broad River Road?
Yes, sir. And that projection is on the last page of the handout we provided. So you can look through there and look at the inflation factors, the forecast, the remaining forecast, meaning the remaining dollars remaining in that forecast.
Thank you.
Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was waiting to make sure that the committee members had a chance to ask questions. I wanted to thank staff for bringing this back before us. This has been a project that's been on my mind. It's not in my district, but it is adjacent to my district. If you threw a rock, you could hit my district from there. And one of the things that you see, the part of the Atlas Road widening that remained was exclusively in my district. And what you see on the part that's proposed to be rescoped, not only did you already have an existing neighborhood there, but you now have an affordable senior housing development there that's brought a lot of residents. For those of us who went to the presentation, ribbon cutting for the Columbia Empowerment Zone right there on that corner, we're looking at having access to law enforcement, to magistrate services. There are future plans about businesses and farmers markets, and this is just a place where there are no sidewalks, and the safety, both the safety and the quality of life would be enhanced by doing this. In addition to that, I think it would be part of our commitment to smart growth, because some of the things that we're doing with the Columbia Empowerment Zone, we know that things are coming to that area because we ourselves are bringing them, and this would be a great step in that direction. So I thank you for bringing this to us.
Questions from the body? Ms. English?
No questions, but I want to echo everything that Councilwoman Newton said, Shakee said, and just so everyone knows, this is like a gateway to our little community in the Lower Richland area, and I'm loving this because this is, I won't say the final frontier, but this is the area where we began tourism, we began all of those things. We have a lot of areas that we're developing, and just like Shakee said, the safety of everything that's coming through, we're right there off the highway. And the seniors, this is an awesome thing, so I thank you all for the work that you're doing, and I know we've been talking about this, seems like forever, and so I really do appreciate it, and thank you so much. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Director Maloney, I have a budgetary question. So the total cost for the Atlas Road widening at the original scope, what's the dollar amount for that?
From the referendum,
Correct.
I don't believe I have that on here.
Tell me what it's going to.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to understand the numbers here, and it's a little confusing for me.
So the construction cost is 44,246,000, and we have, let's see. Go to
So
this
it's going to be
page.
a little over 44 million, and so how much are you going to need to draw down from the project reserve to pay for that amount in its entirety?
Yes, sir. 19 million,
19 million for the project reserve.
yes, sir.
That is going to leave us with a balance of, if I'm reading this correctly, 16.4 million from the project reserve?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Entertain, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Next item on the agenda is award of the construction for the Atlas Road widening. You recognize Director Maloney.
Staff recommends award of construction of the contract for Atlas Road Widening Project to Palmetto Corp. of Conway. And that's, the bid came in at an amount of $44,246,229. And that would include a 5% construction contingency request for a total request of $46,458,544.66. There,
Continue on.
Sorry, sir, there were
No,
two
no.
bidders on the project, separated by about $1.5 million. That is provided on about the third, fourth page of the AB.
See it on page 17. Questions from the body? I have a question, Director Maloney. This is Palmetto Corp. Conway.
Yes, sir.
Is that the same contractor that's working on hardscrabble?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask, because again, I'm not an expert in as far as when it comes to the procurement process. But in light of the challenges that we've heard with hardscrabble, and I'm not saying it's on Palmetto Court, we know about the issues with utility relocation and what have you, but I would be lying to you, or I would be disingenuous if I didn't tell you that I had concerns about them taking on additional work, especially a project of this magnitude. So do you have any sense, I guess, when they would be able to start on the Atlas Road widening project, or when do we anticipate them starting on this project?
Yes, sir, this spring.
This spring?
Yes, sir. So if you look at Hardscrabble Road, it has about a year left. And of that year, it's primarily road work, asphalt paving, some curb and gutter work. Our project here will be in utility construction for about 18 months before street construction starts. So this is about a 3-year construction period for Atlas Road. And when they're done with Hardscrabble Road, they'll be 6 months clear before they would start on this project.
On record as saying I have reservations about providing them with additional work, knowing that we've had multiple delays, with hardscrabble. I know we've talked with DOT recently, and we've been given or provided with new completion dates. I know for the southern end of hardscrabble, that's supposed to, I think the projected completion date is spring 2024 from Farrow to Crane Creek Bridge. I know the northern end of hardscrabble from Rima Pond to Lake Carolina sometime this summer. And then we've been told that everything in between should be completed by spring 2025. So I just have misgivings about adding to Palmetto Corp's workload, knowing that most of my constituents have just sort of run out of patience with the delays with respect to hard scrabble. Again, a lot of it is just beyond Palmetto Corp's control due to utility relocation or what have you. But I would be remiss if I didn't express, that apprehension. So, additional comments, questions, discussion? You recognize Mr. Branham?
Be able to share some of the factors that would be appropriate in the analysis for a bid or an assessment of the bids received beyond just cost alone or price estimate?
Right, the two items and tests are a responsible bidder and a responsive bidder. Procurement handles the responsive bidder, and we do have members of procurement here to augment what I say. Jennifer Ladishkin, Director of Procurement, is here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, instead of having it augmented, can we just have the procurement director address that question?
Yes, you
Hi.
may.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Maloney. So as Mr. Maloney mentioned, we would award a bid to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. We don't have evidence that they cannot perform this additional work, and so therefore they would be considered responsive and responsible. They have been awarded many projects over the past several years between hard scrabbles, initial construction, and today, so I don't know that we have any evidence to suggest that they cannot perform the additional work.
I don't think, Ms. Wadishkin, it's a matter that they can't do the work, but it's a matter of the work being completed timely. That is the concern, and if you add to their workload, again, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm just telling you, from on the outside looking in, if you got a project that's taken, nearly 7 years to complete, and then we're still adding to their workload, it makes one wonder, okay, well, if they've taken on more work, will that delay, say, the project that's taken 7 years, an additional year, additional 18 months? It's just, I think it's only natural and even reasonable to think that if you add to someone's workload, can they complete a current project timely? Will that extend the current project that they're working on? That's all. So this is not me taking shots at Palmetto Corp. I'm quite sure they do great work, but I'm also hearing from constituents as well about just the impact it's beginning to have on their quality of life when a project takes years beyond, or when you're constantly receiving additional completion dates. At some point, the public begins to lose their patience, and then they hold us as elected officials accountable, and they want answers. And so that's all.
Understood, sir. Yes, understood.
Thank you, Ms. Padushkin.
You're welcome.
I want to go to Ms. Newton, and then you.
Thank you. And my question is not about procurement, if yours is in that track. Okay. But it is about timing. And so generally speaking, Mr. Maloney, looking at the fact that we've now added on to this project, is there anything that you're able to say now about how that would affect the projected timeline for the completion of the entire project?
We spoke to South Carolina DOT about that because adding it on to the project would take it back through a design review, 60%, 90% review. They foresee this having been reviewed prior, albeit through prior DOT standards that have changed very minorly, that they could take this additional part through a more rapid process, such that by the time the larger part is in road construction, this new section could be underway. So that would be the plan.
And then as part of that, is that also your way of saying that the previous part that was already approved further north on Atlas Road, that would continue along on the schedule that we had outlined previously?
I'm sorry, ma'am, the part that's further north?
Well, I think it's north. Don't count me for directions.
Yes,
the,
ma'am.
the part that was already, the part that's in District 11,
Yes.
is that going to be on the same schedule that it was going to be on before, or will that be affected by this?
Yes, ma'am. That new part would be bid to a new a contractor,
Okay.
so we would be at the same stage with that.
Thank you. But I do still think it's north.
Yes, ma'am.
Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Maloney, my question is just in general, so echoing what Chairman Walker said, every time we go out in the public, if the person lives in Northeast, inevitably we get the hardscrabble road question. So my question for you is, when we assign these contracts, I'm assuming there's a deadline for the contractor to complete the project. Are there any financial penalties written into the contract if they don't complete it?
Yes,
On
sir.
time?
Yes, sir. We have liquidated damages. Jennifer, our typical.
Yes, we actually use the SCDOT schedule for liquidated damages, and it's a sliding scale according to the dollar value of the project. So the higher dollar value project, the higher the liquidated damages would be.
So just curious in general, is it 5%, 10%, 1% a month? What?
It's by day, and I've seen them range from, on the low end, $250 a day, high end, $1,000 a day.
That doesn't seem high enough. We should make it $10,000 a day. I mean, that's
Well,
$1,000 a day is not
Yeah,
much.
Unfortunately, they can't be punitive, so, I mean, we can't arbitrarily just assign a dollar
Is that a
figure.
state law, or can we change it?
I would defer to
Well, we need to
Mr.
look
Wright.
at bumping that up, I think. Anyway, that's a subject for another day.
Another day. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Mackey?
Thank you. Director Maloney, going back to Ms. Newton's question and your response related to SCDOT stating that, I guess, the designs they would kind of count as already reviewed and could go through just APIT. Did we get that in writing?
No, ma'am, we haven't gotten that.
I would request that that actually be done in writing. I think, DOT's review time frame plays a huge role in the completion of these projects in a timely. And oftentimes I feel as if we hear things, it's not in writing, people change over, RPGs change, and then no one knows what we're talking about anymore. And so I would definitely state that that should be something that we get in writing to ensure that what we see in Hardscrabble is not going to happen on Atlas Road.
Yes, ma'am.
No comments. You recognize Ms. English?
Thank you. I want to go on record as saying I share your concerns, because this is, this is my district, and thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
You recognize Mr. Wright?
I just would like to say that just from legally, procurement wise, since they are the lowest responsive bidder and they are, I guess, have been deemed to be able to do the job, the only options you have is to pretty much accept them or don't do the project. So you can't go with the other company. You can't go with the other company in this matter. You have to. The lowest responsive bidder is the one you can choose. You can vote against them, but you either vote for them or against them. It doesn't go to the next one.
So if you vote against them, then let's assume that the vote is in the negative. I don't know what the vote's going to be. But ultimately, the process starts all over again, right? For the procurement process, the bidding process starts over again.
Well,
As you said, we can't go to the next.
you can't go to the next
Right,
person,
So
so
we would have to, you go back to.
it would, but we probably would have some. There would probably be repercussions. Let's just say that.
All right. Recognize Mr. Branham?
So responsive is, they provided us what we asked for in the bidding process in a timely manner. Responsible, what I feel like I'm hearing from you guys is they're not proven to not be able to do the job.
Correct.
That's the standard, is could they get the job done at some point ever? Or is there a timeliness factor? Are there other factors that could be considered to define responsible?
Yes, if I could be recognized again. Yes. So when we talk about responsible, we're talking about, do they have the capabilities of performing the work? So for a project of this magnitude, we would look at, do they have the staff? Do they have the equipment? Do they have the capability of, funding a project of this scope and that sort of thing? And so again, there's nothing that would lead us to believe that they don't have that. Now where someone would use those resources, that's another issue, but in our due diligence, we're looking to establish, do they have the capabilities of performing this work to this degree?
So, and I don't know anything about this company or the project specifically. These are just general questions, but yeah, if they have not met the performance expectations, at some point, surely prior performance could be factored in to determining whether they are responsible, right?
It could be factored in if you have an objective way to record their performance history, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to make a motion.
Recognize Ms. Mackey.
Motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Second. All right, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
No.
Walker,
Yes, but with reticence.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, next item on the agenda is item 5C, Transportation Penny Update. Director Maloney, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Want to just take a quick moment to talk to you about this particular part of the update. You may recall back in October of last year, Council, as a majority of Council, took an action authorizing staff to prepare for a potential referendum related to transportation penny. As a part of that, we received questions about, what are the things that, what has the penny done? How can you share information with us in a focused way that helps communicate the work of the penny? And so what you have before you now, Director O'Kane is going to provide you that focused look at what the penny has done that was passed in 2012. So at this time, I would ask that you recognize Director O'Kane, Communications, to proceed with that penny update.
Director O'Kane, you recognize.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Thank you, Administrator Brown, Chair Walker, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you this afternoon to update you all on the public education efforts as they relate to the transportation penny. Before I get into the presentation, I want to bring to your attention the packet and the information that you have within that packet. You will see a few working documents there. Part of that is messaging as it relates to the presentation that I'm about to share with you. Another is a Q&A, a proactive Q&A, which I want to stress will be an ever-evolving document. And as you all hear from your constituents in your respective districts, if you could share with us any questions that may come about that we might need to add to this document. Also, you will find a brochure which gives several highlights of the transportation penny and its progress to date. This also can be tailored to your respective needs throughout the community, in community meetings and other events that you may attend. So please, again, I encourage you to share with us any feedback you have related to those materials. In 2012, the residents of Richland County made a significant decision to invest in the future of their community by supporting infrastructure and public transportation with the aim of enhancing safety, economic growth, mobility, and overall quality of life. This presentation provides an analysis of the work done over the last decade and the significance to Richland County. Please keep in mind, while this presentation gives a holistic view, it can be tailored to each of your respective council districts. After residents voted in 2012 for the transportation penny, we have been on a roll. The penny builds a stronger, safer, more vibrant Richland County and the neighborhoods within it. Residents have better access to workplaces, local businesses, and other amenities. They have increased walkability to green spaces, entertainment, and local businesses, as well as new intersections and miles of new sidewalks contributing to health and safety. Over the last decade, our local economy has experienced remarkable growth. While we cannot attribute this success solely to our penny investment, it undoubtedly contributed to the energy and dynamics of our community. The penny has been a major contributor to economic development, delivering an outstanding return on investment. We have seen nearly 4,000 new businesses, nearly 20,000 new jobs, a 60% decrease in unemployment, over $4.7 billion in investments, and 2.5 million new annual visitors. The penny is responsible for significant economic investment deals. Direct impacts include more than $1 billion in total investment and 1,100 new jobs through 5 projects. Of the $1 billion from the penny that was utilized, $24 million was allocated to support the extension of Shop Road, which by proxy aided in several other projects in the area. Those projects include Mark Anthony Brewing, City Roots, and Serba Solutions. Everyone can understand the importance of having safer and better roads, as it leads to fewer accidents, smoother commutes, and avoids wear and tear to vehicles. Here is a current summary of how the penny has contributed to these improvements. There have been 120 plus miles of roads resurfaced, 500 plus roadways, bikeways, and greenways completed, 11 new intersections constructed, and 85 dirt roads paved. Here too, we have direct examples of the penny at work. Projects like those have translated to remarkable improvements. An example being the Clemson Road widening, where we have seen a 25% reduction in reported accidents and an expected 46% less wait time at each penny improved intersection. Another example is North Springs Road at Harrington Road, where recent statistics show a 40% reduction in all accidents and a 60% reduction in vehicle rear end accidents. With 1/3 of the penny, Richland residents have invested in a modern, efficient, and broad-reaching public transportation system known as the Comet to enhance mobility for everyone in the county. Look how far 1/3 of the penny has carried us. Miles traveled have increased 41% from nearly 1.7 million in 2012 to nearly 2.4 million in 2021. "29 new routes have been added to connect more people to their destinations. In 2012, there were 0 bus shelters. Now, there are 160 bus shelters and 114 new benches. The Comet also has added 29 buses to its fleet. Additionally, ridership has doubled from 1.4 million riders in 2012 to 2.8 million riders in 2021. The penny is making an impact on every part of the county, as demonstrated by these examples. Whoops, too fast. It's also important to note that the Comet has been consistently recognized over the years for its financial management. The citizens of Richland County are receiving an even greater value for their investment, which equates to about $1 billion in revenue, 60% of which is generated from within Richland County and 40% which is generated from outside of Richland County. To date, the penny has collected $710 million, which was leveraged by an additional 10% through federal grants, matching funding, and other sources, valuing about $67 million. In closing, it's important to note that not only has the transportation penny directly impacted growth throughout Richland County, the construction and improvement of roads, pedestrian pathways, and greenways also has set in motion better avenues for businesses to connect with their customers while improving the quality of life and safety in all of the communities that we serve. And that, council members, is a presentation, again, that we will be using in our public education efforts as we visit with local chambers, housing association, other organizations within the community. And again, going back to my initial comments, this can be used as is. Of course, it can be tailored to each of your respective districts. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Here's what I'm going to suggest, Director O'Kane. Let's have Mr. Jones present to council as well, and then once he finishes, then the body can ask any questions they may have of you, or the questions may be more germane to Mr. Jones's presentation, if that's okay.
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chair, other members of council, it's great to be with you. And just as we're pulling up the presentation, each of you have a hard copy of this. My colleague Emily Luther and I have been working on helping us continue to move down the roadmap. And so let's take you to the second page of the presentation. You may recall this is something you have seen before. This is our roadmap, which incorporates 19 public meetings, one of which we've already had on March 19th. Where council adopted a resolution giving the TPAC a charge, and we'll talk a little bit more about the TPAC in just a minute. Do note that the chairman of the TPAC, Mr. Black, is here with us tonight. And we're now on the second leg of the roadmap, and if you'll go to the next slide, I want to focus on these two legs. The first is tonight's meeting, where we'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we call project principles, and we'll go back through what that means. We're pulling all of this bit of information from the work session PowerPoint that council has already seen. But very importantly, this meeting and the guidance that council has already given to the TPAC by virtue of its March 19th resolution will then hopefully put the TPAC in a position where it can then start some deliberations that it's been asked to have in order to give council some additional information and guidance. And if we'll go to the next piece. You may remember this slide. We talked about the need to move along a continuum where we take all the needs that have been identified by Stantec, we filter them through a set of principles to be established jointly by, certainly approved by this council with input and advice from not only this committee, but also from the TPAC to ultimately get us to a position where we can categorize projects and prioritize projects to be considered to be funded by the next penny. And so the role of the Transportation Advisory Committee, as stated in the March 19th resolution, is to start to dig into these questions, but to do so with your guidance. And if we go to the next slide, I wanted to remind council what project principles are intended to be, and remind this committee what they're intended to be and what they're hopefully going to get us to. But they are a set of guiding principles for, or guidelines, if you will, for the council to determine which of the needs identified by Stantec are actually projects that need to be undertaken by the next penny. And so these are effectively your way of deciding what's important and what's to be prioritized. And some examples of principles are on the next slide. These could include, but this is by no means an exhaustive list, how you divide the penny among the various categories. We've talked about community improvement projects. We've talked about county advancement projects. And to echo what Ms. O'Kane was just talking about, we've talked about comment enhancement projects. And so we've got to make a decision about how, if we proceed with the penny, how the proceeds will be divided among those project categories. But along the way, we've also got to decide what's important. And so the kinds of things that we have heard council talk about that we'd like to hopefully elicit some additional discussion tonight or this afternoon would be safety, would be what do we do about projects that were not completed in the last penny? What do we do about ensuring that projects and dollars are completed around the county so that the penny is spent equitably? And there may yet be others, Mr. Chair, that the committee may want to talk about this afternoon, and also that TPAC may want to discuss as well in its deliberations. If you go to the next slide, and that I note is about 4 minutes, which is, we wanted to give you all some time for discussion, and in particular, wanted the chair of TPAC to hear what this committee has to say that would enable them and speed them along in their process. And so, Mr. Chair and other members of the committee, we now intend for the floor to be open to talk about what sort of project principles would be important.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And so, any questions, comments from the body for Mr. Jones or for Director O'Kane? Starting with you, Ms. Mackey, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this is a comment and question, I guess. Mr. Jones, you hit on it just about maybe, I guess, projects that were, what was the word you used? Not completed, unfunded. What was the word you used?
I think I said not completed.
Not completed,
Yeah.
yes. So projects that were not completed currently, I do think it's important to make sure we still figure out a way to complete those. I know some of them maybe didn't get completed because if it was a dirt road, maybe they didn't get the sign off on those, but I understand that's a different reason for non-completion. But I do think it should be a priority of the body to look at those that were out there already that didn't get completed and make sure we figure out a way, if they're still needed, right? I know a lot has changed over time. If they're still needed and it wasn't due to property owners not wanting it, then I really think we should look at that being one of the priorities. Thank you.
Ms. Mackey. And before I go to you, Ms. Newton, I kind of want to stay on that, Ms. Mackey's sort of line of thought here. And that is it important to make a distinction between unfunded versus projects that are not complete? Or when you say not complete, Mr. Jones, are you referring to unfunded projects? Or is it both when you say not complete?
I leave that open to this council to determine which of those, from a principal standpoint, you'd like to focus on. I recognize, and I've heard Director Maloney explain the difference between not completed and unfunded for various reasons. Certainly he's here if we need to have a refresh on that. But I do think that's one of the questions to be answered, Mr. Chair.
Well, the reason I asked the question, Mr. Jones, is because I just think it's important for the public to understand, at least from what's been communicated to me, is that under the current penny, we have enough dollars to finish all the funded projects. So when I hear that something is incomplete, my mind, at least, what I extrapolate from that is, oh, well, they don't have enough money to finish the projects that they said they were going to complete, versus something that's unfunded. It's part of the penny referendum, but those were not the projects that were prioritized, right? So I guess I don't want the public to get sort of confused if we're using the, I guess the description incomplete and unfunded interchangeably. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So that's why I was just asking, far as when you say incomplete, are you referring to unfunded projects as well, or is there a distinction for you?
I think from my perspective, I'm sort of using it in a more macro sense, maybe
Okay.
a bigger sense. I think the distinction you're making is important and would be something we'd like to filter through the principles established by council.
Okay. All right. Ms. Newton, did you have your hand up?
I touched the microphone and you intuited that at some point I might want to say something, so I'll keep rolling if that's okay.
Absolutely. Keep
So
on rolling.
first, to follow up with what Councilwoman Mackey and Councilman Walker said, thank you for that clarification for unfunded versus incomplete. I appreciate that, and I really wanted to echo Councilwoman Mackey's comment that that's something that I would really love for us to see. I can see many individuals in my mind's eye right now that I go to every neighborhood meeting and they say, hey, my road is road X on the unfunded list. When will you ever get around to it? So I could not agree more or more strenuously advocate for us to review those unfunded projects because they were important and you have people who've been waiting on them, and I think that it's important in general and important also from a trust perspective. So wanted to say that. My two other comments are, you know, we've had various discussions and I'm trying to remember some of the categories that we've talked about before. I think, you know, there are things like sidewalks, which in my district at least are deeply tied to safety in terms of the areas that I see. So there's road widenings in that kind of category, but there's also quality of life and safety projects. And so from my perspective, as we look at being a community that's growing, that wants to take care of the residents that we have, and also, you know, make sure that we're accommodating future growth, I'm open to whatever better terminology people want to use, but those sidewalks, that interconnectivity, that safety, that thing that makes the experience of living in Richland County safer and easier is a category that I would like to see us discuss. And then just finally, I didn't write down what my finally was. I remember now. As much as I appreciate all the work that was done by Stantec, as we're out and having conversations with the community, there are additional items that are being identified. And so I guess from my perspective, I would just want to be clear on what the process is, if citizens still wanted to share feedback or council members have feedback, how we bring those additions to that list. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Wanted to say something, Mr. Jones? Okay. Mr. Weaver, Mr. Branham, and then Ms. Teresa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jones, I would like to see if we could get a document, maybe we already have it, that says when you back the comment money out and you back out the money for projects we're already committed on, either from the last penny or whatever, to see how much new money would be left. Because I think what I'm hearing from folks in my district is we need to try to get some kind of geographical equity this next round. I know districts have different needs. I understand that, but I think every district, council district, should be guaranteed, if you will, promise, whatever the word is you want to use, a certain amount of money so that these folks can be more motivated, shall we say, to buy into the second penny. Because if all the money's going to 5 districts, it really doesn't. And I'm not saying it is, but if it did, then, you know, it's going to lower our support at the polls. So I was wondering if we could get that kind of list.
So we were, if I may, Mr. Chair, so the financial elements of this we recognize are very important. In fact, just as we were coming into the meeting tonight, we were discussing with Assistant County Administrator Thomas just that very issue about how can we separate what's going to be probably likely more earmarked for the comment and then figure out what the new money really is. So we hear you. I think that's a way, that is information that we will have and can present as we kind of continue to walk through this process.
Okay, last thing I'll say, Mr. Chairman, is I think all of us would agree up here that we know the needs in our own district best. And so if we could have a plan to know that there's X million set aside for our district, then I think it would be helpful to, you know, help the powers that be within our district to know where to spend it. So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Branham, Mr. Racio, and then Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. Yeah, I think an additional thought, just to drill down a little bit more, and again, because we're also speaking to TPAC in a way today, to include a review of projects that were de-scoped along with the items that were unfunded, or whatever the terminology was there. We just talked about Atlas Road, and there is some, you know, level of improvement that's still happening there. So, you know, maybe that's part of what I'm thinking about. Maybe it's not. I know, again, Broad River Road, for example, a certain stretch made it through to the funding under this 2012 penny tax, but another part that was actually identified and scheduled, in a sense, as far as listed, didn't happen. So I would want that obviously to be contemplated along with anything else that was deemed like unfinished business under the last one. I would specifically ask, and I think we've had a little bit of this happen already, but let's try to make sure that we're in contact with the COG as much as possible to see if there's a duplication or a redundancy there that we could avoid if they already have intentions to use state money for stuff. And then the third item, again, just being Comet. I'm thrilled to see the investments that they made over the last 12 years now, I guess, with physical facilities, the benches, the shelters, and all that sort of stuff. I was always so sad to see that the Columbia bus system didn't have those kinds of things that I saw in other places. And now we've really caught up in a lot of good ways. So I hope that there's some good investment there. And I say that partly to say, Comet might have had 1/3 of the first round of funding, but I don't know that they need a third a second time around. I don't want that to be an assumption that is started with. That would be my opinion. I'd like to just have a more data-based analysis of what their needs are versus just an assumption that they should get the same fraction that they got before. Thank you.
Gracia, and then Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. And I sit with interest as I listen to my colleagues talk about the Comet, and just knowing that with no funding source from the penny, we essentially are charged with either no bus system or finding some other funding mechanism. So, and I know that we have figures that an appropriate request from the Comet, either with staff now or about to be with staff, and I don't know if those numbers have been delivered yet. I will also just pivot really quickly and say that as I am talking to the people in neighborhoods, almost every single neighborhood meeting that I go to, every constituent that I talk to, every bit of outreach that I have regarding any kind of transportation, maybe I'll use the 98% that Ms. Barron uses, but I will say 98% of that is pedestrian safety. It is something to do with a walkway, a sidewalk, can you please pave this road? The side of this road is crumbling into the ground. Those are the kinds of things that I get outreach about. So as we're talking about categories, I know that the people of Richland County, the people that we serve, desperately want and need more ways that they can walk safely, bike safely, and get around their neighborhoods safely. So, thank you.
Mackey?
Thank you. Definitely agree with safety. I also just agree with truly looking at the county in a holistic way and where we've seen a large amount of growth. I think where we look at some of the previous or current penny and projects and where we've seen the growth now in the county is different, and making sure we're addressing that. But then also when we talk about the future needs and planning and continued economic development and growth in our county, how do we have more foresight and plan for that as well as we think about projects? I understand that we all represent districts, but as a body, we represent the county. And I do think it's not always equal, and we have to know that. Some of us have municipalities in our districts and some of us don't. So when you look at it, some of us, your municipality gets funding from the state, they get funding from other places, and they get funding from the county. So they have 3 or 4 kind of times to put their hand in the pot. Whereas other districts, all we have is the county. And so I think we have to be mindful of that and think more holistically about what makes our county best as a whole, wherever our infrastructure needs truly are. And in some cases, that may be in one part of the county because we haven't done anything there for 20 or 30 years. And it makes sense now that we really make sure that the transportation projects are there to match the growth that we've seen in population and the needs. So I really I am not of the mindset that it has to be every district equally. I don't think that's a fair approach to look at the true needs of our county. I think we need to look at it from a holistic approach. I'm sure every district has, some key projects that really need to happen in a district, whether it's to address safety, whether it's to address infrastructure needs. I think that's more of where we come from versus a dollar amount of equal spending, because a project that I really may need in my district is 200 million, and maybe one that you really, really need is only 10 million. It doesn't make it the need any less based on the dollar amount. We still both need it. So I would encourage that we look at a holistic approach for our county versus focusing on equal distribution of money per district.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize Mr. Jones.
I just wanted to give some assurances to the committee and other members of council that there are three categories right now, ultimately that we anticipate presenting to the voters. And I think the prescience that the council has had to think about those categories enables you, I think, to get to everywhere we've talked about today. The first category is community improvement projects. Very much in the nature of what's been discussed, things that might be district specific, things that might be more pedestrian, family, lifestyle focused. There's a category contemplated to deal with those sorts of projects. Do we know yet how much of the dollars will go there? No, we don't. That's part of the consideration of this committee, the TPAC, and the council. The second category that the council has advanced is county advancement projects, intended to be of a larger scale, intended to be beneficial across the board to the citizens, perhaps on highly traveled roads, perhaps on roads that are in high growth areas, the bottleneck of which impacts commerce throughout the county. So those two categories are very much intended to cover some of the needs discussed today. And of course, the final category is comment enhancement. So I just wanted to highlight for you that I think so far, at least, the categories that council has talked about can get us there. Now we're just sort of taking the list of needs, and we have to figure out a way how to get them in those categories and how much dollars to put in the categories. That's part of the procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Oh.
Are there some things that we could have done statutorily the last time that the county cannot do this time in terms of changing laws in that period of time?
So, Mr. Livingston, the question I'm hearing is, are there things that have changed since we did the last penny that we might be able to implement differently this time? The statute itself hasn't changed, but as we're all well aware, we've had a fair amount of guidance issued on the statute. We've watched other counties now embark on transportation penny programs. And part of our role, and part of Ms. Luther and I's role, has been to sort of look around the state and figure out what the best practices are and bring them to the table for our penny. So for instance, I'll just give you two examples, and I recognize we're up against time, Mr. Chair. The concept of having categories that speak more to the voters and less to just words on the ballot, like we've discussed, that's very much intentional, and those are things we're seeing other counties do. The idea of having a fixed time period on your penny, but not necessarily a fixed dollar amount that's not tied to cost of projects to give you more flexibility, that's something we're also talking about. And the final thing is just having percentages assigned to where the money is going rather than hard dollar amounts. And of course, as we've discussed with council, and I'll end on this point, it's been our recommendation, it's one that we've talked at length about with Mr. Wright, about putting you all in a position to have the maximum flexibility that you can have around the projects themselves. So as you know, we are not recommending that a long list of projects necessarily be set in stone and approved in accordance with the penny ordinance if the council chooses to approve it. What we are recommending, however, is a list of projects and principles on how to prioritize those projects that will be living and breathing even beyond the time the penny is approved, to enable this council and staff and the transportation department to more easily manage the needs as they come up. And finally, I'll say we've also suggested that some of the dollars in each of the categories be set aside for needs that are going to be anticipated, whether they be growth, whether they be economic development, God forbid, whether we have another weather event, that we have dollars set aside that are not yet tied to projects so that this council can react as it needs to during the pendency of the penny.
Chair, one last thing, I'll make it quick. Okay, thank you. The only thing that I did not receive tonight in this update that I thought I would receive is where we are with our current penny projects and anticipated timeline, so a full list of where we are. So I just wanted to put that out there, hoping, Mr. Chair, that we can receive that update very soon.
Director O'Kane, you're good. It's at 5:04, so.
Motion to adjourn?
All right.
Second.
It's been moved to properly second, non-debatable, Madam Clerk. Oh, look, Ms. Newton's not on the committee.
Right.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's been moved to
I'm the
second.
one that's
Motion
Motion to adjourn?
It's been moved to second. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes,
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
we are adjourned.